I'm going to show you how to install and adjust our solid lifter pushrod conversion kits. Pushrod adjustment is one of the most frequently asked questions on our tech line. It's pretty simple, but I think a lot of guys who are used to working on cars are just used to a different procedure. They're looking for somewhere to stick a feeler gauge, and of course we're just too polite to tell them where to stick it. You may be interested to know that when George Smith Sr. started S&S Cycle back in 1958, the very first product he brought to market was a solid lifter conversion kit for panheads. That's because the hydraulic valve train in those engines just didn't cut it for high-performance applications. And it's essentially the same valve train that Harley-Davidson used until 1984. That's why back in the day, all hot rod pans and shovels ran solid lifters. But enough history, let's grab a wrench.
S&S offers several options for converting to solid tappets and pans and shovels. First, there's this simple adapter that fits into the tappet body in place of the hydraulic unit. This adapter allows you to reuse the stock pushrods. The stock pushrods aren't extremely robust, but they will work okay with a mild bolt-in cam and stock valve springs. Next, we still offer S&S's original product. This is a kit that includes insert adapters that replace the hydraulic units to make an adjustable solid tappet, which is used with solid non-adjustable pushrods. Finally, we have the S&S adjustable pushrod kit with solid tappet adapters. These adapters also replace a hydraulic unit to make a solid non-adjustable tappet. With this kit, the adjustment is in the pushrod. This kit can't be used with panheads unless you use shovel pushrod covers. Otherwise, you won't be able to get a wrench on the adjuster nuts. If you're running a high lift cam and aftermarket valve springs, I'd recommend one of the S&S pushrod kits. For less demanding applications, the adapters and stock pushrods should work alright, as long as your stock pushrods are in good shape. However, any stock shovel pushrods are at least 30 years old, and a lot of them are pretty messed up. Regardless of which type of solid lifter you decide to use, they are all adjusted the same way. So, in the interest of saving time, I'm only going to show you the S&S adjustable pushrods. Once you understand how it's done, you can adjust any of them. To get at the pushrods a little easier, let's remove that air cleaner. But since this isn't an air cleaner video, we'll use magic. Let's get started. Just so we don't have any surprises, the first thing we'll do is to remove the seat so we can disconnect the ground cable from the battery. This bike has an aftermarket quick disconnect cable. Next, we'll remove the spark plug so we can turn the engine over easily. We'll need to do that to adjust the pushrods. We'll jack up the rear wheel. Then we'll put the transmission into high gear. Now we can remove the pushrod cover keepers and slide the pushrod tubes up. We're only going to show you how to install and adjust the rear pushrods because the front pushrods are done exactly the same way. As you can see, this engine has the stock style hydraulic tappets and pushrods in it. By turning the rear wheel, we turn the engine over until both rear tappets are on the heel of the cam and at their lowest point of travel. To help visualize what's happening, this is the lobe of the cam that pushes the valve open. This is called the heel of the cam. It's also referred to as the base circle. When the tappet is on the heel, the valve is closed and the pressure is taken off the pushrods. We loosen the lock nut on the pushrod so we can adjust it to a shorter length. We'll make it short enough so we can remove it from the engine. The pushrod is short enough now to pull it right out. We'll do all the other pushrods the same way, but in the interest of saving time, we'll just show you this one. Next, we remove the tappet guide by removing the 4 12-point fasteners and pulling it out. You may have to smack it gently with a soft hammer if it's been on the engine for a long time. We're going to reuse these tappet bodies, so we'll note which is the intake and the exhaust so we get them back in the same position. So we remove the hydraulic unit and replace it with the S&S adapter. In the event of interference, you may have to sand the adapter so it is a snug fit, but not so tight that you need to press them into the tappet body. Next, we need to block off the oil passage in the tappet guide. First of all, the solid tappet doesn't need a pressurized oil supply. But the main reason is that an aftermarket cam with a smaller base circle may cause the tappet to go down farther in the tappet guide and uncover this oil feed hole. This will result in low oil pressure and oil leaks from the pushrod tubes, because every time the tappet is at the lowest point of travel, pressurized oil will spew out of that hole into the pushrod tube. It's pretty simple. Just run an 832 tap into the hole from the bottom of the guide and screw the 832 set screw included with the S&S pushrod kits into the hole with a little Loctite. Blow any chips out with compressed air and you're done. Since these parts are going into an engine, they need to be cleaned with solvent. A little bit of dirt in your engine can totally ruin your day. Reassemble the pushrod covers with new O-rings. You may be tempted to skip this step, but it's less work to do it now than it is to take it apart again and do it later when it leaks. Apply some assembly lube to the tappets and install them in the tappet guide. Using a new gasket, install the tappet guide in the crankcase. For 1977 and later engines, we recommend that you use a tappet guide alignment tool to start the installation. 1976 and earlier tappet blocks use tapered tappet screws which center themselves. Once the alignment tool is in place, you can torque the remaining 3 screws to 6 foot-pounds. Install the 4th screw and then tighten them all to 8 to 10 foot-pounds or 95 to 120 inch-pounds. Again, we rotate the engine by turning the rear wheel to make sure that the tappets are at the bottom of their travel. That means that this cylinder is on the compression stroke and both valves are closed. With a new O-ring seal in the head, install the rear intake pushrod and pushrod cover. We should note here that the front exhaust pushrod is the longest, followed by the rear exhaust. The intake pushrods are the shortest. Turn the adjusting screw to lengthen the pushrod until it contacts the tappet. Make sure it's seated in both the rocker arm and the tappet. Adjust the length until there is no play or shake, but you can still turn it with your fingers. Tighten the lock nut against the pushrod adjuster and recheck the adjustment of the pushrod. It should spin freely with a little drag. Follow the same procedure for all the pushrods. And by the way, it's important to adjust pushrods in a cold engine. And if you're entertaining the idea of adjusting them really tight so they don't get noisy when the engine is hot, a word of advice: don't. That will release compression and make the engine really hard to start when it's cold, especially if you're kick-starting. All that's left is to close up the pushrod covers and reinstall the cover keepers. Put the spark plugs back in and reconnect the battery. It's also a good time to clean up the bike. If you let oil or fingerprints burn onto your pipes, it's not going to be easy to get them off.
So that's all there is to installing and adjusting S&S solid lifter pushrods. If you can screw the cap back on your toothpaste tube, you can probably do this. We hope this video has helped you get the job done, and we hope to see you out on the road, not on the side of it.